Show me what he never bothered to see. The words escaped Linnea's lips as the pack leader stood at her door in the falling snow, his massive frame blocking out the winter night, his dark eyes holding something she had not seen directed at her in years. Desire. Recognition. The kind of attention that saw beyond duties and daily routines to the woman beneath. Her late husband had stopped seeing her long before his death in the raid 3 months past, had treated her as housekeeper and mother to their children, never as desirable Omega worth pursuing or cherishing. But this Alpha, Ulf, the pack leader who lived in the dwelling next to hers, looked at her like she was treasure waiting to be discovered. Before we begin, comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. Linnea had been widow for 3 months. Her husband Hakon had died in a raid against neighboring territory, leaving her alone with their 2 young children. She was snow-white Omega with pale skin and long white hair that fell to her waist. Gray eyes that had lost their spark during her marriage to a man who had stopped noticing her existence. Hakon had been decent enough provider but terrible husband. He had courted her properly in their youth, won her hand through traditional means, bonded her in ceremony everyone approved. But after their first child was born, something shifted. He stopped seeing Linnea as desirable mate and started treating her as servant, who happened to share his dwelling. He never touched her except when biological imperatives demanded, never spoke to her about anything beyond household management and children's needs. Never looked at her with appreciation or desire or even basic recognition that she was woman with thoughts and feelings beyond her domestic duties. For 5 years, Linnea had lived in marriage that was partnership in name only. She raised their children, managed their household, supported Hakon's position in the pack. And she slowly died inside from being invisible to the man who was supposed to cherish her. When Hakon died in the raid, Linnea felt complicated grief. Sad that her children lost their father, relieved that she no longer had to live with someone who made her feel worthless. Guilty for feeling relieved, uncertain about her future as widow with young children and no mate to provide protection. The pack leader Ulf had lived in the dwelling next to theirs for 2 years. Linnea had noticed him, of course. He was impossible to miss. Massive Alpha who stood over 8 feet tall with heavily muscled frame built from years of combat and training. Dark hair and darker eyes. Quiet intensity that made others respect him without him needing to demand it. But she had been mated to Hakon, so she kept appropriate distance. Exchanged polite greetings when their paths crossed, nothing more. She assumed Ulf barely noticed her existence, just as her husband had not. But after Hakon's death, things changed. Ulf began finding reasons to speak with Linnea, asking if she needed help with tasks too heavy for her to manage alone, bringing extra meat from hunts to ensure her children were fed, repairing damage to her dwelling that she could not fix herself. At first, Linnea thought he was being kind pack leader looking after widow under his protection. But the way he looked at her suggested something more. His dark eyes would linger on her face when they spoke. His voice would soften in ways it did not with others. His presence felt intentional rather than coincidental. 3 months after Hakon's death, Ulf came to her door as snow fell heavily. He carried wood for her fire and meat for her stores, practical reasons for the visit. But when she invited him inside to warm himself by the fire, the conversation took different turn. "Your children are with your sister tonight?" Ulf asked. "Yes," Linnea confirmed. "She offered to keep them so I could have quiet evening to myself." "It has been long time since you had peace," Ulf observed. "You work hard caring for your children and your household without help. You deserve rest." Linnea felt tears threatening. No one had acknowledged how difficult the past months had been. How exhausting it was to manage everything alone while also grieving complicated loss of husband who had stopped loving her years before his death. "I manage," she said quietly. You do more than manage, Ulf said, moving closer. You thrive despite being given so little support or recognition. You are strong Omega who deserves better than what you were given. Linnea met his eyes and saw genuine admiration there. He saw her. Actually saw her as person rather than just widow or mother or household manager. The recognition made something break open inside her. Håkan stopped seeing me long before he died, she admitted. I do not think he noticed me at all in final years of our bonding. He noticed only what you could do for him, Ulf said, not who you were. That was his failure, not yours. How do you know? Linnea asked. How do you know it was not my failure? Because I see you, Ulf said simply. I have watched you for 2 years, seen how you care for your children with patience and love, how you manage your household with intelligence and skill, how you navigate pack politics with grace, how you maintain dignity even when your mate treated you as invisible. You are not invisible to me. The intensity in his voice made Linnea's breath catch. You have been watching me? For 2 years, Ulf confirmed, respecting your bonding to Håkan even though I saw how he failed to value you, wishing I could show you what it means to be cherished rather than tolerated. Now you are free from bond that brought you no joy, and I want to show you what he never bothered to see. What do you see? Linnea whispered. Everything, Ulf said. I see Snow White Omega with intelligence sharp enough to advise chieftains. Beauty that takes my breath away every time I look at you. Strength that carries burdens without complaint. Fire buried beneath years of being ignored that is waiting to burn bright again when someone finally pays attention. Show me, Linnea said before she could stop herself. Show me what he never bothered to see. The words hung between them, invitation and challenge. Ulf moved closer until he stood directly in front of her. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face with one massive hand. You are beautiful, he said, his thumb stroking her cheek. Your white hair catches firelight like it is glowing. Your gray eyes hold depths your husband never bothered to explore. Your skin is softer than anything I have ever touched. You move with grace that makes me forget to breathe. You speak with intelligence that challenges me to think more deeply. You are everything I have wanted for 2 years while respecting your unavailability. Linnea felt tears spilling over. No one had spoken to her like this in so long, had seen her as desirable woman worth pursuing, had made her feel valued beyond her domestic functions. Ulf wiped her tears gently. I will court you properly if you allow it, he said. Show you every day what you are worth. Give you the attention and devotion you should have been receiving all along. Make you feel cherished rather than tolerated, but only if you want this, only if you choose me freely rather than because you need protection or provision. I do need protection and provision, Linnea admitted honestly. I am widow with young children. Those are practical concerns. Then I will provide them regardless of your choice, Ulf said. You are under my protection as pack leader. I will ensure you and your children have what you need whether or not you choose to explore partnership with me. The choice to court or claim is separate from my duty to protect pack members. That is not the choice I am asking you to make. What choice are you asking? Linnea said. Whether you want to be seen, Ulf said. Whether you want to be cherished. Whether you want partnership with Alpha who will value you for who you are rather than just what you can do for him. Whether you are ready to let someone show you what your husband never bothered to see. Yes, Linnea said. I want that. I want to be seen. Then I will show you, Ulf promised. What followed was revelation. Ulf courted Linnea with intentionality Håkan had never shown even in their earliest days. He asked about her thoughts and listened to her answers. He noticed small things like when she was tired or worried and offered support without being asked. He brought her gifts chosen specifically for her interests rather than generic offerings. He spent time with her children, showing them attention their father had rarely given. And he looked at her constantly with desire and appreciation that made her feel beautiful for first time in years. The pack noticed the courtship immediately. Some approved, seeing strong pack leader providing for widow under his protection. Others disapproved, thinking 3 months was too soon after Hakon's death for Linnea to be accepting new Alpha's attention. Linnea's sister was among the approvers. "Hakon treated you terribly for years," her sister said bluntly. "You deserve Alpha who actually sees and values you. Ulf is good man and strong leader. If he makes you happy, claim that happiness without guilt." But others were less kind. Whispers followed Linnea through the settlement. Accusations that she had not loved Hakon properly if she moved on so quickly. Suggestions that she had been unfaithful even before his death. Cruel implications that she was desperate widow throwing herself at pack leader for security. Ulf heard the whispers and confronted them directly. Linnea was faithful wife to Hakon despite his neglect, he announced to those spreading gossip. She mourned his death appropriately, and she deserves happiness after years of being ignored by a mate who failed to value her. Anyone who continues suggesting otherwise will answer to me. The whispers stopped after that, and the courtship continued. 2 months after that snowy night when Linnea first asked Ulf to show her what Hakon never saw, Ulf asked her to formally accept him as her mate. "I want to bond you properly," he said, "give you partnership you deserve, claim you as mine while also honoring that you are your own person with thoughts and choices that matter. Will you accept me?" Linnea looked at this Alpha who had shown her more attention and care in 2 months than her first husband had shown in 5 years, who saw her completely and valued what he saw, who made her feel cherished rather than tolerated. "Yes," she said, "I will accept you." The bonding ceremony was simple but meaningful. Linnea wore white furs and flowers in her long white hair. Ulf stood beside her, looking at her with such obvious desire and devotion that no one could doubt his feelings. When the ceremony concluded and they retired to his dwelling, Linnea felt nervous anticipation rather than resigned duty. Ulf had made clear through his courtship that he wanted her specifically, not just any Omega to warm his bed and manage his household. What followed was everything Hakon's claiming had not been. Ulf took his time, building anticipation with touches and words that made Linnea feel treasured. When they finally came together, it was mutual desire rather than obligation. The bond formed between them strong and clear, connecting their emotions in ways her bond with Hakon never had. Afterward, they lay together in the firelight, and Ulf continued what he had started that snowy night, showing her exactly what Hakon had never bothered to see. "You are extraordinary," he told her, "intelligent and beautiful and strong. I will spend every day making sure you know your worth." Linnea felt something healing inside her. The years of being invisible were ending. She had Alpha who actually saw her and valued what he saw. The months that followed established new patterns. Ulf consulted Linnea on pack matters, valuing her strategic insights. He ensured she had time for herself beyond domestic duties. He helped with their children rather than treating them as solely her responsibility. He touched her frequently with affection that had nothing to do with claiming and everything to do with cherishing. And he looked at her constantly with that intense focus that made her feel beautiful and valued. Linnea's children adjusted to having Ulf as stepfather. He was patient with them, answering their questions and playing with them in ways Hakon never had. He treated them as important people worth his attention rather than inconveniences to be managed. Within a year, Linnea was pregnant with Ulf's child. The pregnancy was different from her previous ones. Ulf was attentive throughout, ensuring she had what she needed and showing genuine excitement about their coming child. When their daughter was born, Ulf held her with same wonder he had shown Linnea from the beginning. Beautiful like her mother, he said, looking between the baby and Linnea with obvious love. You have given me treasure I do not deserve. You deserve everything, Linnea said. You showed me what I was worth when I had forgotten. You gave me partnership instead of servitude. You see me every day and make sure I know I am seen. That is greatest gift. 2 more children followed across the years. Their family grew, blending Linnea's children from her first bonding with the children she and Ulf created together. All of them thrived under Ulf's attentive leadership. As years passed, Linnea sometimes thought about her first bonding to Håkon, the loneliness of being invisible to her mate, the slow death of being valued only for domestic labor, the relief when he died and freed her from bond that brought no joy. She felt less guilt about that relief now, understood that she had mourned what could have been rather than what was. Håkon had been poor husband who wasted the years they had together by refusing to see the woman he had bonded. That was his loss and his failure. Ulf made sure she never felt invisible again. Decades into their bonding, when they were both growing old, Ulf still looked at Linnea with same intensity he had shown that snowy night. Still told her regularly what he saw when he looked at her. Still made her feel cherished rather than tolerated. I am old now, Linnea said one evening as they sat by the fire. My white hair is truly white from age rather than just natural color. My skin shows years of life. I am not the young Omega you first courted. You are more beautiful now than you were then, Ulf said, because now you know your worth. You carry yourself with confidence rather than resigned invisibility. You shine with knowledge that you are valued and seen. That beauty goes beyond physical appearance to encompass everything you are. You still see me, Linnea said with wonder. After all these years, you still see me. I will always see you, Ulf promised. That will never change. When Ulf passed first, dying peacefully in his sleep after long life well lived, Linnea mourned genuinely and deeply. This was different from mourning Håkon. This was loss of partner who had truly seen and valued her. Loss of Alpha who had shown her what she was worth and never stopped showing her across decades together. But even in grief, she felt grateful. Grateful that she had experienced real partnership after years of invisibility. Grateful that Ulf had courted her when she was broken widow who had forgotten her own value. Grateful that he had shown her what Håkon never bothered to see, and continued showing her until his final breath. She followed Ulf within the season, unable to imagine life without the bond that had sustained her for so many years. Their children buried them together and told their story. The pack leader who saw the invisible widow. The widow who had been ignored by her first mate. The courtship that began with recognition rather than obligation. The bond built on mutual seeing and valuing rather than domestic convenience. The partnership that showed what relationships could be when both people actually paid attention to each other. The love that grew from being truly seen after years of invisibility. Their legacy became lesson about the importance of seeing your mate, of valuing them beyond their practical functions, of making them feel cherished rather than tolerated, of paying attention to who they are rather than just what they do for you. Generations learned from their story that partnerships flourish when both people feel seen and valued, and wither when one or both becomes invisible to the other. The story of Ulf and Linnea became touchstone in their settlement for understanding what made partnerships work or fail. Young alphas were taught to pay attention to their mates beyond practical functions. Young omegas were taught they deserved to be valued for who they were, not just what they could provide. The contrast between Linnea's 2 bondings became central teaching example. Håkon represented failure of attention. He had courted Linnea properly in their youth, won her through approved methods, created what looked like successful bonding from outside. But inside the partnership, he had stopped seeing his mate, stopped noticing her thoughts, her feelings, her needs beyond basic provision. Stopped treating her as person worth cherishing. The result was Linnea slowly dying inside, despite having all the practical elements of successful bonding. Secure dwelling, healthy children, respected position in pack. None of it mattered when she felt invisible to the person who should have valued her most. Ulf represented success through intentional attention. He courted Linnea as widow, which was already a complicated situation. He showed her from the beginning that he saw her completely, not just her beauty or her domestic capabilities, but her intelligence, her strength, her fire that had been dampened by years of neglect. He continued that attention throughout their decades together, never allowing her to feel invisible or taken for granted. The result was partnership that thrived because both people felt valued and seen. Linnea's daughter, from her bonding with Ulf, named Saga, grew up watching her mother's transformation. Saga remembered the quiet, resigned woman her mother had been when bonded to Håkon, and she saw the confident, vibrant woman her mother became with Ulf. The contrast shaped how Saga understood partnerships and what she would accept in her own life. When alphas courted Saga, she evaluated them carefully for signs of genuine attention versus surface interest. Did they ask about her thoughts or just compliment her appearance? Did they listen to her answers or just wait for their turn to talk? Did they value her capabilities or see her primarily as future domestic manager? Most alphas failed her evaluation. They courted her properly according to tradition, but their attention was shallow. They saw Snow White Omega with good lineage and assumed that was sufficient. They did not bother to learn who Saga was beyond surface attributes. One alpha named Einar passed her evaluation. He asked genuine questions and listened to answers. He valued Saga's interest in healing arts rather than dismissing it as Omega's hobby. He spent time learning her preferences and opinions rather than assuming he knew what she wanted. He showed sustained attention that suggested he actually saw Saga as a complete person worth knowing deeply. Saga accepted Einar's courtship and they bonded when she came of age. Their partnership followed the model Ulf and Linnea had established: mutual seeing and valuing, attention to each other's needs and thoughts, partnership rather than hierarchy, and the pattern continued across generations. But not every descendant learned the lesson successfully. Saga's brother Harald, Linnea's son from her bonding with Håkon, struggled with the teaching. He had lived his early years watching his father ignore his mother. That was his model for how bondings worked. When Harald chose his own mate, an Omega named Runa, he unconsciously replicated Håkon's failures. Harald courted Runa properly and created what looked like good bonding. But after their first child was born, Harald started taking Runa for granted. Stopped noticing her beyond her domestic functions. Fell into same pattern his father had demonstrated. Runa began experiencing what Linnea had lived through. Feeling invisible to her mate despite doing everything required of her. Managing household and raising children while slowly disappearing as person in Harald's eyes. But Runa had advantage Linnea had not initially possessed. She knew Linnea's story, knew that being ignored was not acceptable norm but sign of failing partnership. And she had example of Ulf and Linnea's attention-based bonding to use as comparison. Runa confronted Harald directly. "You are treating me the way your father treated your mother," she told him. "Ignoring me except when you need something from me. Taking my labor for granted while never seeing me as person with thoughts and needs beyond household management. I will not accept this. If you want our bonding to survive, you will learn to see me the way Ulf saw Linnea." The confrontation shocked Harald into awareness. He had not realized he was replicating his father's failures. Once Runa pointed it out, he could not unsee the pattern. He began working consciously to pay attention to Runa, to ask about her thoughts and feelings, to notice her as person rather than just household manager, to show appreciation for who she was, not just what she did. The effort was not always successful. Harold struggled against unconscious patterns learned in childhood, but he kept trying because Runa insisted on being seen. And gradually their bonding shifted from Harold's neglect toward more balanced partnership. Not as effortless as Ulf and Linnea's attention had been, but functional in ways Harold and Hakon's neglect had never been. The story evolved to include this additional lesson, that patterns of neglect could be broken if both people were willing to work at it. That awareness of the problem was first step toward solving it. That mates could learn to see each other even if it did not come naturally, as long as they prioritized the effort. Years passed and the settlement thrived. The teaching about seeing and valuing mates became embedded in their culture. Young people learned to evaluate potential partners based on quality of attention they offered. Bonded pairs learned to check in with each other about whether they still felt seen and valued. And the community developed ways to intervene when partnerships started showing signs of one person becoming invisible. One such intervention came when young Alpha named Torsten bonded Omega named Greta. For the first year their bonding seemed strong. Torsten paid attention to Greta, valued her opinions, made her feel cherished. But in the second year, changes appeared. Torsten started dismissing Greta's input on decisions, stopped asking about her day or her thoughts, began treating her as household manager rather than cherished mate. Greta felt herself beginning to disappear the way Linnea had disappeared in her bonding to Håkon. Greta's mother noticed the changes and brought concern to settlement elders. "My daughter is becoming invisible to her mate," she said, the same pattern Linnea suffered through. "We should intervene before it becomes entrenched." The elders agreed and called Torsten and Greta before them. They asked direct questions about the state of their bonding. How often did Torsten ask Greta's opinion on important matters? When had he last told her she was beautiful or valued? Did he notice when she was upset or tired? Could he describe her interests beyond household management? Torsten struggled to answer. He had not been paying attention, had not realized he was failing to see his mate. The elders did not condemn him, but they did insist he change. "You are walking the path Håkon walked," they told him, "allowing your mate to become invisible through neglect. This destroys partnerships from inside, even when everything looks functional from outside. You will attend counseling with experienced bonded pairs who will teach you to see Greta again. And Greta, you will speak up when you feel invisible. Do not suffer silently the way Linnea did for years. Demand the attention you deserve." The intervention worked. Torsten learned to pay attention again, to value Greta beyond her practical functions, to make her feel seen and cherished. Greta learned to voice her needs rather than accepting invisibility, and their bonding became an example of how patterns could be interrupted before they caused lasting damage. This proactive approach became standard practice. The settlement watched for signs of neglect in bondings and intervened early rather than waiting for partnerships to deteriorate completely. They taught that seeing and valuing your mate was not automatic but required conscious, sustained effort. That attention was choice you made daily, not one-time decision during courtship. Several generations after Ulf and Linnea had passed, their story remained central to how the settlement understood partnerships. The graves where they were buried together became a place where struggling bonded pairs would visit, seeking inspiration to see each other again through eyes of intentional love rather than habitual neglect. A scholar named Thyra began documenting stories about attention and neglect in partnerships throughout the settlement's history. She collected accounts of bondings that thrived through mutual seeing and those that withered through invisibility. When she compiled her collection, she placed Ulf and Linnea's story at the center with detailed analysis. This story, Thyra wrote, teaches us that love without attention dies slowly from inside. Hakon loved Linnea enough to bond her properly, provide for her adequately, create family with her. But he did not love her enough to keep seeing her after domestic routines became familiar. He allowed her to become an invisible fixture in his life rather than cherished partner. The cost was Linnea's slow death inside even while she remained physically present and functionally capable. Ulf showed us the alternative. He saw Linnea completely from the moment he first noticed her. He continued seeing her throughout their courtship and bonding and all the years that followed. He made conscious choice daily to pay attention to who she was beyond what she did for him. The result was partnership that sustained both people across decades because both felt valued and seen. The lesson is clear. Attention is not automatic. Seeing your mate is choice you must make repeatedly. As familiarity grows and domestic routines become established, the temptation is to stop noticing your partner as individual person and start seeing them only through lens of their functions in your life. Resist this temptation. Make intentional effort to see your mate. Ask about their thoughts. Notice their feelings. Value their capabilities beyond household management. Tell them regularly what you see when you look at them. Show them through words and actions that they are not invisible. Partnerships flourish when both people feel seen and wither when one or both becomes invisible. Choose to see. Choose to value. Choose attention over neglect. The collection became required reading for all young people approaching bonding age. It shaped how entire generation understood the work required to maintain healthy partnerships. And it ensured Ulf and Linnea's legacy continued teaching crucial lessons about attention and value. But the story also sparked debates about whether neglected mates should stay or leave. Linnea had stayed with Hakon until his death freed her. Was that right choice, or should she have left earlier? Some argued Linnea showed strength by staying and raising her children despite her husband's neglect. She fulfilled her obligations. She provided stability. She demonstrated resilience. Others argued Linnea should have left Hakon years before his death. That staying in partnership where she was invisible modeled unhealthy relationship for her children. That she deserved happiness sooner rather than waiting for death to free her. The debates were nuanced and ongoing. Most agreed that ideal was preventing neglect through education and early intervention. But when neglect became entrenched despite attempts, opinion divided about whether staying or leaving was better. Linnea's daughter Saga weighed in on the debate based on her personal experience. My mother stayed because leaving was not a realistic option in her circumstances, Saga said. She had young children and limited means. She made choice based on constraints. What mattered was when she had the opportunity for partnership with someone who truly saw her. She claimed it without hesitation. She did not allow guilt to keep her trapped. We should not judge whether she stayed too long with Hakon. Instead, we should celebrate that she recognized her worth when Ulf showed her attention she deserved. And we should work to ensure other Omegas have options my mother lacked, so staying in neglectful partnerships is choice rather than necessity. This perspective influenced how the settlement approached supporting neglected mates. They created resources allowing Omegas to leave partnerships where they felt invisible. They also strengthened intervention approaches, and they taught that neither staying nor leaving was universally right but depended on circumstances and personal choice. The most important evolution was cultural shift, recognizing that feeling seen and valued was an essential need in healthy partnerships. That attention was core requirement for bonding to thrive. That invisibility was sign of failing partnership requiring intervention. The legacy of Ulf and Linnea extended far beyond their own lifetimes, shaping how their settlement understood the fundamental importance of attention in partnerships. Their story became framework for recognizing when relationships were thriving through mutual seeing versus dying through gradual invisibility. The lessons evolved across generations as new situations tested whether people had truly internalized the teaching about paying attention to their mates. One significant evolution came when the settlement faced influx of refugees from neighboring territory that had been destroyed in conflict. These refugees brought different cultural practices around partnerships, including acceptance of neglect as normal rather than problematic. The contrast between cultures created tension and opportunity for deeper understanding. Among the refugees was Omega named Astrid, who had been bonded to Alpha named Njal for 7 years. Their partnership followed pattern common in their original settlement. Njal provided adequately, protected his family, fulfilled basic bonding obligations, but he paid no attention to Astrid as person. Never asked her thoughts, never noticed her feelings, treated her as household fixture rather than valued partner. Astrid accepted this as normal because everyone in her original settlement operated similarly. When Astrid and Njal arrived at Ulf and Linnea's settlement, they encountered very different expectations. Bonded pairs here asked each other about their days, showed affection beyond functional necessity, made effort to see each other as individuals rather than just fulfilling roles. Astrid watched with confusion and growing awareness. She saw how Omegas here carried themselves with confidence born from being valued. How Alphas consulted their mates on decisions rather than simply commanding. How partnerships operated as true collaborations rather than hierarchies where one person served the other. One evening, Astrid approached Saga, Linnea's daughter, who was known for counseling struggling partnerships. "I do not understand the bondings here," Astrid admitted. "My mate provides for me, protects our children, fulfills his obligations. Yet I am told this is not sufficient, that I should expect more." "What more is there?" "You should expect to be seen," Saga said gently. "Your mate should notice when you are sad or happy or worried, should ask about your thoughts and value your answers, should make you feel cherished rather than tolerated. These are not luxuries. They are basic requirements for healthy partnership." "But no one in my original settlement operated this way," Astrid protested. "All the bondings were like mine, functional but not emotionally connected." "If everyone lives this way, how can it be wrong?" "Because you are slowly dying inside," Saga said. "I can see it in your eyes. The same emptiness my mother carried when bonded to my father's predecessor. You function adequately, but you do not thrive. You exist, but you do not feel alive. That is cost of being invisible to person who should see you most clearly." Astrid felt tears threatening because Saga was right. She had been dying slowly for 7 years, accepting invisibility as normal price of partnership. "How do I change this?" Astrid asked. "My mate does not know any other way. He thinks he is being good alpha by providing and protecting." "You teach him," Saga said. "You tell him you need more than provision and protection. You need to be seen and valued. You show him examples of how bondings work here. And you insist on being treated as person rather than household fixture. If he refuses, you have choices our culture supports that yours may not have offered." Astrid gathered courage and spoke with Njal that evening. "I need you to see me," she told him. "Not just as Omega who manages our household and raises our children, but as person with thoughts and feelings and needs beyond practical necessities." Njal looked confused. "I provide for you," he said, "protect you, fulfill my bonding obligations. What more do you want?" "I want you to ask about my day and actually listen to the answer," Astrid said. "I want you to notice when I am upset or tired and offer comfort. I want you to value my opinions on decisions that affect our family. I want to feel like I matter to you beyond what I can do for you." "These things seem unnecessary," Njal said. We have functional partnership. Why complicate it with emotions? Because I am dying inside from being invisible to you, Astrid said. Because functional partnership without emotional connection is slow death. Because I deserve to be seen and valued. And because I will not continue accepting invisibility now that I know partnerships can be different. Njal struggled to understand. In his original culture, emotional connection in partnerships was viewed as weakness rather than strength. Alphas were supposed to be stoic providers, not attentive partners. But he saw how bondings worked in this new settlement and recognized his relationship with Astrid was fundamentally different. He began making efforts to pay attention, asking about Astrid's day, noticing her moods, seeking her input on decisions. The efforts were clumsy at first, habit of 7 years of neglect difficult to break. But gradually Njal learned to see his mate, and Astrid began coming alive in ways she had not experienced since early courtship. Their transformation became example for other refugee couples. Proof that patterns of neglect could be broken even when deeply ingrained through cultural practice. That learning to see your mate was possible at any stage of bonding if both people committed to the effort. But not all refugee couples successfully made the transition. Some alphas refused to change, insisting their way was correct, and this settlement's emphasis on attention was unnecessary complication. Some omegas who had internalized invisibility as their proper role struggled to accept that they deserved more. One refugee alpha named Steinar openly mocked the settlement's partnership practices. "My mate knows her place," he said dismissively when counseled about his neglect of his omega Bryn. "She manages household, raises children, fulfills her obligations. This constant attention you demand is weakness that makes alphas soft." "You confuse attention with weakness," the settlement elders told Steinar. "But we see attention as strength. It takes more effort to see and value your mate than to ignore her. Functional provision without emotional connection is easier path. We choose harder path because partnerships thrive through it." Steinar refused to change his approach, and Bryn, who had watched Astrid transform through being seen by Njal, made difficult choice. She asked settlement leaders for help, leaving her bonding to Steinar. The settlement supported her choice, providing resources and protection. Steinar was given option to learn new approaches or leave the settlement. He chose to leave, unable to accept cultural values that contradicted his beliefs about proper partnership hierarchy. This situation raised important questions about whether the settlement should require refugees to adopt their partnership practices or allow different approaches to coexist. After much debate, the leaders established clear position. "We will not force specific partnership practices on anyone," they announced. "But we will intervene when we see patterns that cause harm. Neglect that makes mates feel invisible causes real harm even when it looks functional from outside. We will support omegas who want to leave such partnerships. We will offer teaching to alphas willing to learn different approaches. And we will not allow those who refuse to change continue harming their mates within our settlement." This balanced approach allowed cultural exchange while maintaining core values about attention and seeing in partnerships. Most refugee couples eventually adopted new practices and found their relationships improving. Some left to find settlements more compatible with their original values, and the settlement's understanding of partnership deepened through encountering and working through these differences. Generations continued passing. The teaching about seeing and valuing mates became more sophisticated as people developed better language for discussing attention and invisibility. Young people learned to recognize early warning signs that partnership was sliding toward neglect. Bonded pairs developed practices for maintaining mutual seeing across years of familiarity. One particularly effective practice was regular partnership reviews, where bonded pairs would set aside time to ask each other specific questions. Do you feel seen by me? When did I last make you feel valued? What have I been taking for granted? What can I do to show you better attention? These structured conversations prevented gradual drift toward invisibility by creating regular checkpoints for mutual awareness. The practice spread throughout settlement and became standard recommendation for all bonded pairs. Another innovation came from recognizing that different people needed different types of attention to feel seen. Some omegas felt most valued when alphas asked about their thoughts and ideas. Others felt most seen when alphas noticed their emotions and offered comfort. Still others needed physical affection and touch to feel cherished. Understanding these differences allowed more targeted attention rather than assuming one approach worked for everyone. Saga developed framework for helping couples identify their specific attention needs. She would meet with bonded pairs and ask each person to describe moments when they felt most seen by their mate. The patterns that emerged revealed what types of attention mattered most to each individual. She then taught couples to provide the specific types of attention their mates actually valued rather than assuming their own preferences applied universally. This personalized approach made the teaching about seeing and valuing more practical and effective. Partnerships improved when alphas learned their specific mate's attention language rather than trying to apply generic guidance. Several generations after Ulf and Linnea had passed, a young alpha named Arvid brought new challenge to the settlement's understanding of attention in partnerships. Arvid was intensely devoted to his craft as blacksmith. He spent long hours at his forge, completely absorbed in creating increasingly sophisticated metalwork. When he bonded Omega named Hilda, he assumed his devotion to craft would not conflict with giving her adequate attention. But Hilda began feeling invisible as Arvid spent more and more time absorbed in his work. She tried to talk with him about her day, but he was distracted, his mind still on forge problems. She sought his input on household decisions, but he gave perfunctory answers without real engagement. She wanted emotional connection, but he was too exhausted from forge work to provide it. Hilda recognized the pattern. She was becoming invisible to Arvid not through deliberate neglect, but through his absorption in work that held his primary attention and energy. She brought the problem to settlement counselors. "My mate is devoted to his craft," she explained. "He works hard to provide for us, but his work consumes him so completely that nothing is left for me. I am invisible not because he does not value me, but because he has already given all his attention to his forge." The counselors recognized this as different type of invisibility than Hakon's neglect of Linnea. Hakon had simply stopped seeing Linnea, choosing convenience over effort. Arvid wanted to see Hilda, but had depleted his capacity for attention through intense focus on his craft. Both led to same result, but required different solutions. They counseled Arvid about sustainable balance between craft devotion and partnership attention. "You cannot give all your attention to forge and expect your mate to thrive on whatever scraps remain," they told him. "You must reserve real attention for Hilda. Not exhausted leftover attention after forge has consumed you, but genuine engaged attention when you have capacity to truly see her." Arvid struggled to find balance. His craft demanded deep focus and long hours. But he recognized Hilda was dying from being his second priority after metalwork. He began setting boundaries around forge time to ensure he had energy remaining for partnership. The adjustment was difficult but necessary. This situation expanded the settlement's teaching about attention to include concept of attention as limited resource that must be deliberately allocated. People could not give unlimited attention to work, hobbies, children, and mates simultaneously. They had to make conscious choices about where to invest their focus and energy. The teaching evolved to emphasize that partnerships required priority allocation of attention. Mates could not receive only leftover attention after everything else was satisfied. They needed to be high enough priority to receive genuine engaged focus rather than exhausted remnants. This refined understanding helped many partnerships where one or both people were being depleted by demands on their attention from sources other than their mate. Parents learned they could not give all attention to children and expect their partnership to survive on scraps. Leaders learned they could not devote everything to pack responsibilities and maintain healthy bonding. Craftspeople learned their work could not consume all their focus if they wanted their mates to feel seen. The balance was individual to each partnership, but the principle was universal. Attention was a finite resource that required conscious allocation to ensure mates received sufficient quality focus to feel valued and seen. As more generations passed, the settlement developed comprehensive understanding of attention in partnerships that went far beyond Ulf and Linnea's original teaching. They recognized multiple types of neglect. Active neglect, where mates chose not to pay attention despite having capacity. Passive neglect, where mates were depleted by other demands. Cultural neglect, where entire communities normalized invisibility. They developed interventions specific to each type. Active neglect required direct confrontation and insistence on change or consequences. Passive neglect required help with balancing attention allocation across competing demands. Cultural neglect required education and example of different approaches. They also recognized that attention alone was not sufficient for healthy partnerships. Mates could pay attention but fail to value what they saw, could notice their partners but judge them harshly, could see them clearly but use that knowledge to manipulate or control. True healthy partnership required both attention and positive valuing. Seeing your mate clearly and appreciating what you saw. Noticing their needs and responding with care. Understanding their thoughts and respecting their perspectives. This nuanced understanding prevented misuse of attention teaching. Some alphas had tried to argue they were paying attention even while being critical or controlling. The settlement clarified that attention without positive valuing was not what Ulf and Linnea's story taught. The teaching was about cherishing attention, not surveillance, about making mates feel valued, not monitored, about partnership, not control. The distinction mattered enormously in practice. Hundreds of years after Ulf and Linnea had lived and died, their story remained central to how the settlement understood partnerships. But it had evolved from simple tale about being seen into sophisticated framework for understanding attention, valuing, balance, and cultural practices around partnership health. Young people still learned the basic story. The widow whose first husband stopped seeing her. The pack leader who noticed her completely. The transformation that came from finally being valued and cherished. The decades of partnership built on mutual attention. But they also learned all the layers of understanding that had built up around that core story. The different types of neglect, the various attention needs, the balance required when attention was limited resource. The importance of positive valuing alongside seeing. The interventions available for struggling partnerships. The memorial to Ulf and Linnea had been expanded over centuries to include representations of all these evolved understandings. Visitors could see the original story depicted in carved stone, but surrounding it were additions showing the teaching's growth. Refugee couples learning to see each other. Craftspeople finding balance between work and partnership. Parents allocating attention between children and mates. Elders teaching young people to recognize warning signs of invisibility. The memorial had become living document of how one couple's story had shaped entire culture's approach to partnership across hundreds of years. On significant anniversaries, the settlement gathered at the memorial for ceremony honoring Ulf and Linnea's legacy. The current generation's wisest teachers would share insights about attention and partnership. Struggling couples would recommit to seeing each other. Young people preparing for future bondings would pledge to practice intentional attention. The ceremony reinforced that this was not historical curiosity but living teaching requiring ongoing practice and renewal. At one such ceremony, many generations after the original couple had died, an elder named Vigo gave speech that captured how the teaching had evolved. Ulf and Linnea gave us foundation, Vigo said. The understanding that partnerships die when mates become invisible to each other. That being seen and valued is not luxury but necessity. That attention is choice we make daily. We have built on that foundation across centuries. We have learned to recognize different forms of neglect, to identify various attention needs, to balance competing demands on our focus, to distinguish cherishing attention from controlling surveillance, to support those trapped in invisibility, to prevent patterns from becoming entrenched. But the core truth remains unchanged. Partnerships flourish when both people feel seen and valued. They wither when one or both becomes invisible. Every generation must learn this anew because the temptation toward neglect is always present. Familiarity breeds inattention. Routine creates blindness. Demands deplete focus. We must choose deliberately to resist these forces, to keep seeing our mates clearly, to continue valuing what we see, to allocate sufficient attention to our partnerships, to insist on being seen ourselves. Ulf and Linnea's story reminds us this is possible even after years of invisibility. Linnea was seen again after being invisible to Håkon for years. Ulf showed her what her first husband never bothered to see. Their partnership thrived through decades because both committed to sustained mutual seeing. We honor them by practicing what they taught, by seeing our mates clearly, by valuing them genuinely, by refusing to accept or inflict invisibility, by building partnerships that sustain both people through mutual attention and care. The gathered crowd reflected on these words, each person considering their own partnership, whether they were seeing and being seen, whether attention was being given and received, whether they were choosing visibility over invisibility. The ceremony ended with traditional practice. Each bonded pair turned to each other and spoke aloud what they saw when they looked at their mate. Not generic compliments, but specific observations that demonstrated genuine attention. I see your worry about our daughter's upcoming bonding. I see how hard you work today despite being tired. I see your excitement about the new approach you developed for tanning leather. I see your sadness about your friend's illness. The practice forced real seeing, made people pay attention in moment, reminded them that visibility required ongoing conscious effort, and it honored Ulf and Linnea's legacy in most direct way possible, by choosing to see. The centuries of teaching produced culture where invisibility was rare exception. But this created challenge. Young people who grew up surrounded by attentive partnerships sometimes took mutual seeing for granted, not realizing how much conscious effort their elders invested. One generation produced young bonded pairs who assumed attention would naturally sustain itself without work. They had watched their parents operate attentive partnerships and believed this would happen automatically. They did not understand the daily choice their parents made to keep seeing each other clearly. The result was a wave of partnerships that started strong but quickly deteriorated as couples discovered attention did not maintain itself. The settlement elders intervened with new teaching emphasis. You have been blessed to grow up seeing healthy partnerships, the elders told struggling young couples. But this becomes curse if you assume what your parents built through effort will appear in your bonding without work. Attention is not natural state. It is deliberate choice made repeatedly. Your parents make that choice daily. You see the result but not the effort. One young alpha named Leaf protested this teaching. My parents never seemed to struggle with paying attention to each other, he said. It always appeared effortless. They just naturally saw and valued each other. Your parents made it look effortless through decades of practice, the elders corrected. But ask them directly whether attention required effort or simply happened. Leaf spoke with his parents that evening. Did you have to work at paying attention to each other, he asked. We work at it every day, his father said. Some days easier than others. But we never assume attention will simply happen. We have practices, his mother explained. Every evening we ask about our day and listen. We notice when the other seems upset. We express appreciation. We check in about whether we feel seen. None of this is automatic. Leaf realized he had been naive. He returned to his own mate with new understanding, and they began implementing similar practices. Other young couples made same discovery. The settlement added this to teaching before bonding, showing not just result of attentive partnerships, but daily work required, made visible the effort that experienced couples had internalized. This helped new generations avoid assumptions that healthy partnerships simply happen through love alone. Another evolution came from recognizing that life circumstances could temporarily deplete capacity for attention. Illness, grief, major challenges could consume focus. The settlement developed supports for partnerships during such periods. These supports acknowledged attention was not infinite, and that temporary gaps during acute challenges were normal with help. This prevented unfair judgment while maintaining concern about chronic neglect. As the settlement's understanding grew more sophisticated, they began teaching about attention in partnerships to children before bonding age. Young people learned to pay attention to family members and friends as practice for future partnerships. They developed habits of noticing others' emotions and asking genuine questions. This early training made attentive partnership more natural when they eventually bonded because the fundamental skills were already developed and well practiced through years of application. Parents consciously modeled mutual seeing for their children, making visible the work of paying attention. Discussing openly how they prioritized partnership even with many competing demands on their time and energy. Showing children what healthy attention looked like in daily practice. The result was generation of young people who understood intellectually and practically what maintaining visibility required long before they formed their own bondings. They had realistic expectations and practiced skills. But even with all this preparation and cultural support, some partnerships still struggled with attention and visibility. Human nature included tendencies toward self-focus, distraction, and taking familiar people for granted. Perfect universal attention was an unrealistic goal. The settlement's aim was not perfection, but establishing attention as priority worthy of conscious effort and providing supports when partnerships struggled. They celebrated improvements rather than condemning imperfections. Recognized that learning to see and value your mate was an ongoing process, not one-time achievement. Supported struggles with compassion rather than judgment. Created culture where invisibility was noticed and addressed rather than normalized and accepted as inevitable or acceptable. The memorial to Ulf and Linnea stood as permanent reminder of why all this effort mattered. The widow whose husband stopped seeing her slowly died inside despite adequate provision and protection. The pack leader who made conscious choice to see her completely brought her back to life and gave her partnership worth having. The decades of thriving partnership built on sustained mutual attention and genuine valuing. The legacy that shaped how entire culture understood what made partnerships work or fail across countless generations. Visitors to the memorial could see carved into stone the core teaching that had sustained their culture's approach to partnership for hundreds of years. Partnerships flourish when both people feel seen and valued through consistent mutual attention. They wither when one or both becomes invisible through neglect or inattention. Attention is not automatic or natural. Seeing your mate is choice you make repeatedly every single day. Choose to see. Choose to value. Choose attention over neglect. Choose visibility over invisibility. Simple words containing profound truth learned through centuries of practice and refinement and ongoing application. Truth that started with one widow finally being seen by one attentive alpha and grew into cultural foundation for healthy partnership across countless generations who learned and practiced the lessons. The story continued evolving because each generation faced new situations that tested and expanded the teaching in practical ways. But the core remained constant and unchanging across time. Ulf saw Linnea when Håkon had not. That seeing transformed her life. That transformation taught countless others the importance of attention in partnerships. That teaching would continue shaping how people understood and practiced partnership for as long as their culture endured. Every bonded pair in the settlement knew the story. Every young person approaching bonding age learned the lessons. Every struggling partnership received support grounded in the teaching, and every ceremony honoring Ulf and Linnea ended the same way, with bonded pairs turning to each other and speaking aloud what they saw, making visible their attention, demonstrating the choice to see, honoring the legacy by practicing its core teaching. In this way, two people who had lived and loved and died hundreds of years ago remained vibrantly present in how their descendants built and maintained partnerships. Their story was not past history but living teaching actively shaping current practice. The widow and the pack leader, the invisible wife and the attentive mate, the transformation through being seen, the partnership through sustained attention. The legacy teaching generations to choose visibility over invisibility. This was Ulf and Linnea's gift to their people, not perfect relationship free from all challenge, but honest example of how attention could save dying partnership and sustain thriving one. How choosing to see your mate made all the difference between empty functional bonding and genuine cherishing partnership. How the work of paying attention was worth the effort because partnerships could not survive without it. Their graves held their bodies, but their teaching lived on in every bonded pair who chose to see each other clearly, every parent who modeled attention for their children, every elder who counseled struggling couples, every young person who learned the lessons before forming their own partnership. The settlement had built entire approach to relationship health on foundation of one simple, profound truth. Show me what he never bothered to see. Those words Linnea spoke to Ulf that snowy night became invitation extended to every alpha. See your mate. Notice who they are beyond what they do for you. Value their thoughts, feelings, and needs. Make them feel cherished, not tolerated. Choose attention over neglect daily. Every generation learned this anew. Every partnership required conscious practice. Every ceremony reinforced the teaching. And Ulf and Linnea's story remained at the very heart of it all. Teaching that being seen was not luxury but absolute necessity. That attention was not automatic but deliberate choice. That partnerships required ongoing work of mutual visibility. That choosing to see your mate was perhaps the most important choice you made in bonding. The legacy lived on not through perfect replication but through ongoing practice and evolution. Each generation adding understanding while maintaining core truth. Each couple finding their own way to practice mutual seeing while honoring the teaching that made such seeing cultural priority rather than rare exception. Ulf and Linnea had shown the way. Their descendants walked the path, and the teaching continued guiding how people built partnerships that sustained both people through mutual attention, appreciation, and choice to see clearly what others might overlook or take for granted.